was thinking that we'd start over with you, Bobby, and maybe you could tell us some of your background in the music. I know that you're related to the Kessinger and Humphreys families in West Virginia, and that influence has spread definitely beyond its region over there in West Virginia. And I think you have ties to the New Ballards Branch Bog Trotters here in Galax as well. So why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Erynn. I come from a family of musicians. I'm a fourth generation fiddler from Roane County, West Virginia. Yes, it does tie into the Humphreys legacy as well, which he was a great fiddler. It doesn't tie in, though, to Kessinger, but I feel like he was a father of mine since that's who I learned to play a lot of music from.
Your family was right beside the Kessingers, so you guys were all intermingled.
We still could be related. I
Yeah,
haven't gone that far yet. But
same area.
But yeah, it is same area. And my father lived to be 94 and a half years old, and 3 weeks before he died, he showed me one last fiddle tune. And I'm the only fiddler that plays it. I won't play it today. I need to woodshed it a bit. It's one that he called the Old Saul Carpenter tune that my grandfather learned directly from Saul Carpenter, which, as you may know, that Saul Carpenter won his freedom at Camp Chase by playing Camp Chase. And but I did learn a great deal from Clark Kessinger. As soon as I got my driver's license, I went to sing. Let's try a little bit of Redbird. Speaking of Kessinger, I shouldn't start that tune right out of the box at 10:30 a.m., but here you go. When I first started to learn to play the fiddle, my dad, I was 13 years old, and I got to carry the fiddle across the hill. That Dad did not trust it with two young boys in the household, my brother being 10 at the time, but you couldn't get to Grandma's house real easy, and you had to walk across the hill to get to the car, so I got to carry the fiddle.
And when we got it home, we tried to figure out how it worked. Of course, Dad played. So I got my start there, but Dad wanted me to hear the fiddling of Reese B. Jarvis. His nickname was Sam. Sam Jarvis played in contests and was really never defeated. And he played in the 1920s. We only have 4 recordings of him. To this day, I still try to live up to Sam Jarvis. Why is that? He was an old-time fiddler, and there's a lot of old-time styles, and they're all wonderful in their own way. But Sam Jarvis stood out. He was different. He was as smooth as Kenny Baker. It was just unbelievable how smooth he was and how clean. His timing, every note was just like a little blanket put on each one. It was just the most beautiful transition. I've always said he hit the best note ever hit. And that went into my fiddling as a melting pot fiddler. Of course, Kessinger being an unbelievable bower that took all kinds of chances with the bow and the timing, yet landing dead on the beat. So, and then you have fiddlers like French Carpenter, Wilson Douglas, Melvin Wine. These were fiddlers that played an archaic, old sound that was heavenly. You had Ed Haley that had technique that Kessinger copied. And Ed Haley's technique, people are still trying to figure out how he attacked the note with the bow going 11 directions at once. Well, Kessinger loved his playing and considered him the greatest fiddler that ever lived. But he had that archaic sound to his fiddling. And what goes into my playing is being the melting pot. What did I want? Who's the best? All of them. All of them. Because I learned something very valuable from each of them, and I try to put it in every tune I play. There are tunes that I try to keep very pure to the tradition, almost note for note if I can. There are others that lend themselves to a little bit of able to put yourself in, and a little bit of comedy almost, and comical. Kessinger was known for being kind of a comedian fiddler. He even danced and played and did all kinds of gestures, and he was hilarious. Mike Humphreys wasn't. Mike Humphreys was serious. Mike Humphreys was a great fiddler related to Sam Jarvis, as well as I was very distantly related. Mike Humphreys come from a very serious, very smooth, a lot of soul, a lot of feeling, that big golf ball size note, and effortless technique. So Mike Humphreys always told me one thing about fiddling that I should do at like 16, 18 years old. He liked and was very complimentary of my fiddling, as was Clark. And he said, "Bobby, don't play it like me. Play it like you."
My dad lived way out in the country, and it just so happened that they could get the Grand Ole Opry on Saturday night. Dad would talk to me about going over to Walton because the old battery was dead in the radio, and they had to go over there and carry this pretty good sized battery. It was pretty heavy that went to that old radio. But they went over there to get that battery ever so often because they could not miss Arthur Smith's one fiddle tune of the night. Dad said it was worth it because he said Arthur Smith played like a smooth running racehorse. It was just smooth sailing. So Arthur Smith was just, very wonderful to these old musicians. They weren't old then, they were young. We're talking about 20s, 30s through there, I guess. But in my family was Sam Jarvis, who was an unbelievable fiddler. My great uncles all played the fiddle. Silas Taylor. Lowell Taylor is responsible for Mike Humphreys' lineage of fiddling, and they learned a lot from that lineage. John Clinton Taylor was a double shuffle fiddler. But Arthur Smith now, the tunes that he played, I'm trying to think of something here that I don't play exactly like anybody because all these styles run together. I'm a melting pot fiddler. That means whatever I hear and like, it goes into the pot. But you don't want to put mayonnaise on cherry pie. But the thing is, you got to be careful on how you put some of these things together. But let's see here. Arthur Smith tune that has kind of his role in it. Let's try a little bit of maybe Bill Cheatham or something like that.
My name's Andy Edmonds. I'm from Mount Airy, North Carolina, and in that area, there's a real old tradition of old-time music, specifically called round peak music, and it's slightly different from other genres of old-time and traditional music in that it has a specific repertoire of tunes, and they're played in a little bit different way with a lot of drive. And I learned from a fiddler who's associated with a lot of the round peak fiddlers named Benton Flippin. I spent the last 10 years of his life with him, learning from him, playing in his band and traveling with him. And he had a really different, unique style, as most of the players in that area did. And that's where I picked up most of my playing from, was those influences. In that area also, there was a sound that was, some might call it transitional, where the influence of bluegrass had sort of crept into the old-time music, and it was just sort of combined, and the elements of both were sort of mixed together. Usually it was played with a fast, energetic drive to it. The tunes that would normally be bluegrass might be played in an old-time way, or vice versa, and it was just kind of all mixed together as just a traditional music.
Now, Andy, I remember seeing him when he was pretty darn young, playing with Benton Flipp and the Smoky Valley Boys, and now he's one of the heads of founding members of the Buckstankle Boys, and great banjo player and great fiddler, and great singer too. So, and they do a lot of old-time and bluegrass music. And Benton, he really, I don't think it's easy to put a description around Benton, but he really was so incredibly unique. Some people say he was a transitional fiddler. Can you give us your take on that background there and the connection between old-time music and bluegrass and other things?
Benton, unfortunately, a lot of times gets lumped in as a round peak player, but he really wasn't. I mean, he shared the repertoire, but I mean, he was totally his own fiddle player,
He's his
totally
own
different.
genre.
And it was very transitional. I mean, he listened and liked a lot of early bluegrass, and then of course he knew all the tunes that his dad and his grandfather, all his family played, and all the local tunes. So I mean, it was, and he had this real bluesy touch, and he just threw it all in the pot, and out came Benton Flippin', and it was, out of this world different and really unique. And I mean, nobody else has ever sounded like him, so it's really different.
Did that influence you and your band nowadays, which really combines both bluegrass, old time, and everything? So he was a big inspiration for you, was he not?
Oh yeah. I mean, I played with him for 10 years, the last 10 years of his life, and most all the guys in the band have played with Benton at some point, So we were around him a whole lot, and that, definitely speaks to how I play the fiddle, his influence. So
I guess he had really no boundaries in a way. So did that really free up your band to playing anything and not being caught in the constrictions of categories?
Yeah. I mean, we're all a fan of the the old stuff, the old bluegrass, old time, all that. And so I mean, we play it both, we mix it together. I mean, especially like around in Mount Airy and Galax, it wasn't really separated so much back in the days. It was just all kind of music.
I think many people on this stage would probably contest to the fact that, the older people didn't separate everything into categories like they do now, and they just played good music, and there was a lot of, whether it's old time or bluegrass or country, a lot that just called it country music. So, yeah, would you play us a tune?
I will. I'm gonna play a tune. It was probably, as far as I know, probably the last tune that Benton wrote. He wrote a lot of fiddle tunes. He was very creative, very intelligent, very creative person, and this was one of the last tunes that we know of that he wrote after his wife Lois passed away. And this was on one of Kevin Ford's CDs, and really glad to see Kevin out this morning. And this one's called Haystack Blues. Is that right? Haystack Blues. Of course, my main influence was Benton, but, I also listened to quite a bit of the Round Peak music, which is down in the Mount Airy area of Surrey County. So that was a lot of what I started listening to when I was, playing the banjo and fiddle and getting into old time music. And I never met, Tommy Jarrell or Fred Cochran, but I've met a lot of folks that played with them or were around them a lot. So I've heard a lot of stories and, definitely, listened to their records intently. And so I don't play a lot of the Round Peak stuff with our group. We do play some of, or as Benton would say, we bluegrass it up a little bit. But I'm going to quickly knock myself out of tune here and try to play a Tommy Jarrell tune. The trick to Tommy Jarrell is to play with a really loose bow. So
Tommy Jarrell rocked his bow a lot, so a loose bow probably helps.
But this is a tune I always like to hear, and Tommy and Fred and those guys play on record. Step Back Cindy.
Next is Corrina Logston, and she lives in Nashville, and she plays all kinds of great traditional and contemporary bluegrass. She plays with Valerie Smith and Liberty Pike, as well as Retro and Smiling, a Reno and Smiley group, and she also plays some old-time music. She played in the Oldtime contest, if I recall. So look out, top contenders in the Oldtime Fiddle contest. And maybe you can talk to us a little bit about some of the styles that you like to play and
I can give
and
a
where
little,
you learned them from.
Yeah, I can give a little background. I am originally from what I'd call the rural Greater St. Louis area. There's not a lot out there, so it's a little hard to tell you where I'm from. But I'm from about 40 miles south of St. Louis, Missouri, close to a small town called Redbud, Illinois. And my mom and dad were aspiring, or are still, I'd say, aspiring bluegrass musicians. They loved bluegrass, had a select number of old-time records as well. And so I grew up listening to a lot of traditional bluegrass records. Fiddle players like Benny Martin, Chubby Wise, Chubby Anthony, Tater Tate, Mac McGahey, of course Kenny Baker, and people like that. And that is really where my heart is, and where what just really moved me about bluegrass and old time music, stuff like that came from people like that. And so I'd say a tune that I always think of when people are like, play something that's real bluegrassy and this and that. And to me, that tune, one of those tunes is Leather Breeches, which is, of course, steeped in old-time tradition and traditional fiddling and things of that nature. But I think it has a lot of bluegrass connection to it. It's also pretty quick, so I haven't had my coffee this morning, so I'm hoping that I'm enjoying listening to everybody up here. I'm hoping that I can get my fingers to move get the dry the dew off the fiddle. All right.
So I thought that was really interesting when you talk about learning, and you were kind of remote where you were, so you relied a lot on a lot of records.
Definitely.
So she had a different way of learning the music, but then she eventually got to know her record collection, because here's the people by the music. So that might have introduced her to it, but you must have met a lot of the people that inspired you later. A lot of those people you mentioned that you first heard on record, right?
I actually was born in 1990, so there were
Few less of them around.
there were a lot of people that when I started playing. Of course, I've mentioned my mom and dad played, so I played with them when I was younger, guitar and banjo and things like that. But there were a lot of people when I started playing fiddle that had just passed, or barely kind of catch some of the people that were still around. But one person that I actually still learn a lot from, and who I'd consider my mentor, started very young, when he was playing very young, and his name was Jim Buchanan, and he played on classic Jim and Jesse recordings, played on some Don Reno recordings, and Greenbrier Boys and things like that. So he is actually one of the few people from first generation, connected to first generation bluegrass, who's still around, who I was able to, and am still able to learn directly from. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have had mentors, and that's really a big thing in the fiddle tradition. Often somebody will take you under wing and teach you a lot, and so many of them have been such incredible, generous teachers.
The fiddle is probably one of the most versatile instruments that I play, and I would say that every genre, the fiddle takes on a different role. So in bluegrass, in traditional bluegrass, it's very heavy fiddle based, and banjo based, really. And so the fiddle is kind of one of these instrumental voices, one of maybe 3 or 4. So you've got the mandolin, the banjo, and the fiddle. And so it's kind of a second voice to the singer. You've got the singer primary out front singing, and then the fiddle's taking solos, backing up the singer, whereas in old time, the fiddle is kind of this cornerstone, just playing the melody, driving the song. Everybody's looking to the fiddle. In bluegrass, that's a little bit different, because it is one of some primary. Does have a primary role, but it's not the mainstay, the one and only, the holy grail type of thing. There are actually many contemporary bluegrass bands that play without a fiddle today, and so it's not nearly as important today in bluegrass as it was when the music got started. In country music, it's similar to bluegrass, except even less of a voice. I would say in traditional country, the fiddle is very similar to the role of the fiddle is similar to the role in bluegrass. And so it takes solos, does backup, plays melody lines like that the singer sings. And today in country music, the fiddle is more of a texture. It's definitely a lot of drones and things like that behind the singer. Might play like a lick with the electric guitar and things of that nature.
Corrina, tell us more about what inspires you.
I really loved Bobby's description about being a melting pot fiddler, because I think that that's really accurate for a lot of us up here to some degree. I'd say to everybody to some degree. Hearing people and it touching you and it going into this place and coming out in different contexts. And Erynn mentioned I play with a lot of different groups, especially this year. Every weekend I'm doing something different. So recently I've been performing a lot with David Peterson in 1946, which is very traditional bluegrass, very what I think of like Benny Martin and things like that, Chubby Wise, fiddle styles. And the next week I might be playing with some singer-songwriter in
Your
Nashville.
husband's not too shabby either there.
He's not too
Jeremy
shabby.
Stevens. He's a
No.
pretty good picker.
Yes, definitely. And Jeremy and I like to play together whenever we can. And the next thing, it might be something more influenced with country or something more contemporary bluegrass and things like that. And for me, a lot of these traditional fiddle styles come together, and they don't just mean something for posterity or for historical significance or something like that. They're still informing music today and commercial music today. And studio fiddlers who are playing on recordings are still informed with these things. It's still going in and it's coming out in their own way, in that melting pot type of thing. One fiddler that is very often associated with bluegrass fiddling is Kenny Baker, who, interesting connection. Kenny's dad was a great fiddler, and he spent a lot of time playing what would be sort of like swing music, big band music, when he was doing service to the country. And later Bill Monroe hired him, and a lot of people associate Kenny Baker with bluegrass fiddling. And Kenny had a really interesting style, and he wrote a lot of really cool fiddle tunes. And I'm going to attempt to play one of Kenny's tunes called Tune for Andy.
a lot in Kentucky where bluegrass, came from, I mean, it's really pretty seamless between old time and bluegrass. And I think it's kind of interesting because a lot of the old time fiddlers or the crossover fiddlers, they have that little bit of shimmer of vibrato like she was using with her left hand there. Even the old fiddlers, J.P. Fraley, Art Stamper, Kenny Baker, Paul David Smith, you just hear, there's so much meshed together there, you can't really separate them too well. It's very organic. The Lundy family, coming from Galax, were surrounded by musicians. I mean, they probably couldn't swing a cat and not hit musicians. And same with the Paisley family. And it's kind of interesting that the Lundys and the Paisley families, these two very strong musical families, end up kind of entwined and then moving outside the area to the Paisleys to Pennsylvania. You live in Delaware now, so you see the spreading from a spreading of musical culture, but complete immersion. I think that we could say that the Lundy families had the opposite. They had complete immersion with musicians around them, probably your whole life.
Oh, yeah.
You probably couldn't escape music. So I know Emmett Lundy is buried within sight of my kitchen window, which is just 5 miles south down here. Very famous fiddler of the region. And a lot of people know Ted Lundy and the Southern Mountain Boys. Yeah. And Ted was your father.
Yeah, sure was.
That's right. And Ted played with Bob Paisley.
Yeah.
And eventually you guys joined the Paisley band.
Yeah. I started out playing mandolin because Jerry Lundy was a fiddle player. And I played mandolin for a long time. Didn't even play the fiddle at all for a long time.
Wow.
And then I picked the fiddle back up, and I haven't gone back to the mandolin since. But
Really?
yeah. But yeah, it's funny because Dad, of course, Dad's from this area here, and Aunt Katie still resides around here, and
Katie
I get to see her at least once a year when I come down here. And yeah, Dad, he left this area, I guess, probably when he was 18 or 19, to go up north to work. He followed my Uncle Eldridge. He went up there, and Dad followed him up there for work, of course. And I think we were the only, we called us hillbillies up there in the city up there. Cause,
I bet you were on your own community, right?
Yeah,
These two musical families that moved farther away. I think that's really interesting. So you guys hung real close together.
Yeah.
Really for generations.
Yeah. And then later on, Dad met up with Bob, which Bob is from West Jefferson, his family is. And
Ashe County.
Yeah, and they hooked up probably in the early 60s, mid 60s, and they got together and played a lot of music for a lot of years. And so I kind of grew up with that most of my life up there in the big city, which is kind of odd, because there was nobody else around that plays bluegrass or old time. And so I guess it just, Dad brought that sound from down here up there, and it just kind of, like Andy was saying, there was no distinction between like old time and bluegrass. It was just music, and so it kind of got crossed a little bit. The bluegrass and the old time kind of meshed together a little bit, And
it's worth mentioning, bluegrass is usually associated with the period of 1945. A lot of people don't realize how new the description of bluegrass is. It's putting together so many things: gospel, old time, blues. Creating this genre that really was only named in the mid '40s. So a relative newcomer.
Yeah.
Same time as rock and roll. So.
Yeah. All my friends were back, and when I was a kid, were all into rock and roll, and then here. My brother Bobby and I would be the only ones playing bluegrass and old time, and we got a few of our friends that today. They love it. They love bluegrass. If it wasn't for us, they probably never heard of it. But
did you teach anyone to play in that region?
There's a few. They kind of picked it up and they kind of moved on and went to rock and roll, but they do come back and play a little bluegrass.
So you extended some influence there.
Yeah.
I know with I learned a lot. I'm from Canada, and I lived in Toronto for a while. I didn't have any old-time musicians to play with, so I taught a whole bunch of people to play, and in about 3 to 5 years, I had a whole pile of people to play with. So you can make your own scene if you have to.
Yeah, right.
Well, let's hear a tune.
Okay, let's see. Let's do an Emmett song. I heard Corrina do this the other day, and she did a great job. I think, yeah.
He's doing some back noting. A lot of Emmett Lundy's pieces are very challenging, and he's holding down a finger and doing these wonderful drones. And a lot of people say that sort of sounds like the bagpipes, and I really think it does. You know, there's a Scots-Irish influence as well as an English influence, African-American influence on this music, but I think you can really hear the droney bagpipe sound in that Highlander's Farewell.
Yeah. I remember one year Dad coming down, and he kind of, well, didn't like leave us here. He kind of, my cousins, the Wilsons, they lived over in Freeze, and I remember staying a whole summer down here. It's kind of the coolest thing, you know, just to be down here for the whole summer, and hung out with Gary and Greg Wilson, they're my cousins, and which is kind of cool. And I got to play with the Wilson brothers band back when I was a little kid, so that was pretty neat. And it was, you know, it was a ritual to come down here every summer and, you know, just to meet up with the family and friends and all. So that's pretty neat. So I'm glad I got to do that as a child, you know.
You know, there's generations of music within your family. Did you ever notice any change? Has the music changed over time at all?
Of course it does.
In your family?
Change. Yeah, it's changed. Because I know Dad, he enjoyed, you know, the old time music. He never could play it, but he always, you know, during the summer months, you know, we'd always come down here, and Dad would always hook up with Kyle or Tommy, and we'd go over to the house, and Dad would just stay there forever, you know, because of course they had things in the locker that he liked, you know, it's under lock and key, so we all know what that is, but so Dad would come down and he would stay for, it seemed like for days, you know, and Dad would just, you know, play his three-finger style behind, you know, with Tommy, and it just kind of fit, you know, it was just music, you know, and so of course that, you know, rubbed off on you know, me, of course, and everybody else, and we'd go home and we'd try to play it, you know, and of course it would change, you know, over, and it's like I say, it's a big melting pot, you know, what, you know, goes in, it comes out a little different, you know, a little different taste, but yeah, you know, Dad, he liked all music, you know. He even, like, in bluegrass, he would take, like, country songs and turn them into a bluegrass style, or an old-time song and kind of put it to his style and make it kind of bluegrassy.
How did you do that?
Just doing it his way, you know, because, like I said, he could never claw hammer, but he enjoyed it, but he would just convert it to his three-finger style and make it his own. That would be his style. So, you know, after a while, everybody associated, the Ted Lundy style of playing, and it was just him, just his influence of other music, going into the pot and coming out as a different flavor. So, and I've always been, growing up, I've always been taught to enjoy all music, because music is music, and it's all good, Mm-hmm.
What you gonna play for us?
I don't know. Let me see. Let's think here. How about a little Chapel Hill March or something?
All right. My name's Erynn Marshall, and I've learned a lot of old-time music in the southern states. I'm originally from Canada, from Victoria, BC, but about half the time I've been playing the fiddle. I've been playing now for 35 years. I've been learning old-time music. I started learning from a lot of 80 and 90-year-old fiddlers in West Virginia, and then I went to Kentucky, and I learned from a lot of old fiddlers there, and now I've been in Galax, Virginia for 5 years, living right on the Virginia-North Carolina border. And so I'm still learning a great deal of old-time music from people around me. And what I really like about old-time fiddling are the crooked tunes, unusual bowing, and some of the bluesiness in it. Crooked tunes are tunes that have unusual lengths of phrasing. Phrases that may not be 8 bars. You may not be able to dance to them in a contra dance, but you can dance to them in some of the old square dances. And they might have 4 beats in a bar, or they might have 6 beats in a bar, or a couple beats in a bar. And I think a lot of these tunes come back to a time when fiddlers, they weren't playing in bands, and they spent a lot of time playing music for music's sake, playing beautiful pieces, for themselves, on their porches. And that music just really drew me in. I have an old soul, and that old music just grabbed me. I'm one of these people that have come from far away to learn the music, but I was taken under wing by some wonderful West Virginia fiddlers, mostly Melvin Wine. And I learned so much from them, especially over a period of 5 years where I visited them a lot, 80 and 90-year-old fiddlers over there. And then I went on to Kentucky, and I learned from some really old fiddlers over there. And then I had the pleasure to move here. So I think it's really interesting, the different regional styles and everything. But one thing I thought I might play is a piece that's kind of a solo piece, sometimes a sense of place can really change the music. So people played differently when they played for themselves on their porch and just played for the beauty of the music than, let's say, if they were playing a dance or something like that. And so you have, sometimes people played in small groups for each other, but you had to play differently if you were playing with a banjo player, let's say. And I should mention all the old fiddlers I visited in West Virginia, none of them remembered a guitar being in the picture before 1920, which I thought was really fascinating. So, and then you have the big string bands and stuff developing. So, and those often moved outside the home. Some of the early dances were in the home. And so a sense of place comes into it as well, because when you were playing by yourself, you could play quite differently. And one thing that a lot of people didn't talk about in the development of playing from solo to playing in banjo, fiddle, duet to string band was playing with singers. And I think early on that the fiddle, they often say is very similar to the human voice. And a lot of fiddlers played old pieces that are related to song traditions or ballad traditions. And they may not be playing the words or anything, but they often played in kind of a vocal style. I don't know if this particular piece has any words back, but it sounds like that archaic style where they dwell on certain notes. And I should mention that one of the only descriptive terms I ever heard an old fiddler or singer ever say to me was the word dwell. And it was Linda McCumbers, Lindy. And she said that people nowadays were cutting the dwells out of the music. And I thought that was really interesting. She was a singer, and she'd sing an old ballad. And often a ballad, an unaccompanied ballad singer would hang and linger on a note. And it may be in an unusual spot, and it was very emotional. And that's what she was talking about, that when you're playing in a group, it's kind of hard to do that. So I'll play an old piece. This one comes from French Carpenter, and it's called Old Christmas Morning. And I like to play it because it has one of those beautiful old dwells in it. You can tap your foot to half of it, and the rest of it's so crooked you can't really tap your foot. So it's hard for me, but I'll try to stop tapping my foot for half the tune. Let's see if I remember it. I haven't played it in a while. Well, I'm going to play one quick tune here from my mentor, Melvin Wine, that I learned from West Virginia. Melvin was from Braxton County. He was born in Stouts Run in 1909, and he played right up until just before his 94th birthday when he passed away. He did have a period of time where he stopped playing for 20 years or so in the middle of his life because of family and religious reasons. For a while there, he felt that he shouldn't play the fiddle. There's a lot of people that preached against playing the fiddle because it was associated with drinking and dancing. But when he couldn't console a young grandchild who started to cry, as a last resort, he pulled out his fiddle. And the child stopped crying, and he decided it was a gift from God, and so he started playing again. And it was, he'd won the National Endowment of the Arts Award. He was considered state legacy, but he was also just an incredible human being, one of the most amazing I've ever met. And he taught me a lot. And he said the kindest thing to me. He said I was good on a bow, and I was learning his music, and he was glad of it. So he kept convincing me to come back, and that's why I'm here today, folks. So I'll play a tune from Melvin Wine. It's called Cold Frosty Morning. Thank you, everyone. Bobby Taylor, Andy Edmonds, Corrina Logston, TJ Lundy, myself, Erynn Marshall. Thank you very much for coming, and come back soon to Chestnut Creek School of the Arts.